They had chained her like a sideshow for the crowd's amusement, but Alara lifted her face, her trembling eyes finding the lone cowboy, and whispered, "Please, claim me." The words were so faint they might have been lost in the scorching wind. Yet those standing nearby heard them, and they laughed. Harsh, rasping laughter burst out like whips striking the frail girl being dragged across the dusty ground. The air in Dry Creek that day was thick, smoke, sweat, and the sharp sting of blood lingering somewhere close. Everyone knew there would be a spectacle. Sheriff Marlowe had announced it earlier, calling the gathering a lesson for anyone foolish enough to defy the law. Alara was shoved into the center of the square. Rough iron shackles bit deep into her wrists, leaving bruises dark and swollen. Her bare feet stumbled over jagged stones and burning sand, streaks of blood marking her steps. The simple dress she wore was torn to rags, fabric ripped enough to bear scratches across her skin, smeared red. Sheriff Marlowe stood high on the wooden stage, the kind used for horse auctions. He threw back his head and sneered, his voice cutting through the crowd. "This is the price of a thief, a worthless girl who dared to stain the law of Dry Creek." The crowd howled. Whistles, jeers, and fistfuls of dry dirt pelted her. A drunken man flung a shattered bottle at her feet, glass splintering sharp beneath her. The chorus of voices rose louder, crueler, the square filling with venomous excitement. But Alara raised her chin. Her lips pressed tight, her breathing unsteady yet deliberate. Inside her chest, her heart hammered as if it would burst. Still, her gaze, unyielding, burned steady amid the chaos. She did not cry, did not beg. Only when her eyes brushed the lone cowboy standing silent at the edge of the crowd did her lips part to release that desperate plea. "Please, claim me." No one could fathom why a girl so disgraced, humiliated before hundreds, would utter such words. A plea that was at once a cry for rescue and a challenge. A plea sharp enough to pierce the heart of the man who had yet to move. The truth of her crime was far from monstrous. She had stolen scraps of stale bread from the town's storehouse. She had never denied it. Hunger had driven her hand, the gnawing ache so deep it left her trembling. For her, being caught was less terrifying than watching her little brother starve. Yet such truth mattered to no one. To Sheriff Marlowe it was an opportunity to display his power. To the townsfolk it was entertainment. An old woman hurled a rotten apple at Alara's feet. A child waved a cactus branch and shrieked with glee. Someone bellowed, "Whip her! Show her the law!" The voices raged louder, a storm of malice. Eyes glared at her not with pity, but with hunger for her humiliation. She was no longer seen as human, but as a thing to punish. Alara shuddered, yet she refused to bow. Though her knees bled from being shoved to the ground, she fought to straighten her back, her chin tilted slightly upward, as if to remind herself, "I am not an animal for their sport." Sweat trickled down her pale face, mingled with dust. Under the merciless sun, the bruises and cuts across her body stood out like raw wounds. And yet, within her eyes, a quiet fire still glowed. Alara's story was not simply one of a thief punished. It was a portrait of injustice, of a girl driven to the edge by hunger. It was a mirror reflecting the cruelty of a crowd that laughed at suffering. Above all, it opened a question. Why did she turn to that cowboy when every other gaze sought only to break her? The question lingered in the heavy air of Dry Creek Square. It had no answer yet, but the cowboy's silence, the way he stood motionless, made the moment all the more charged. The people waited, unsure whether the tale would end in tragedy or in some sudden twist of fate. And it all began with the whisper, "Please, claim me." And the initial connection. The crowd hadn't dispersed. Laughter, whistles, and shouting still echoed through the parched square of Dry Creek. The sun blazed overhead, but Caleb walked through the heat, broad-shouldered, tall, his muscular frame hidden beneath a dust-covered coat. He rarely stopped in towns that relished displaying the suffering of the weak, but something drew him today. He observed. Neither rushing nor flaunting, Caleb's eyes scanned every face in the crowd, noting sly expressions and curious or malicious glances. But amidst the chaos, he saw her, Alara, standing tall, chin slightly raised, eyes gleaming despite bruises and dust. Time seemed to pause. Caleb felt her heartbeat through the distant yet unwavering gaze. In a sea of hostility, Alara became a small but radiant presence, a symbol of strength so striking he couldn't look away. He didn't step forward immediately. Caleb held his distance, as if weighing his next move. Deep down, he knew any action would leave a mark. Intervene, and he'd be pulled into a public spectacle, shattering the fragile peace he sought. Yet his heart would not allow him to walk away. He had witnessed too much injustice, and the pleading in her eyes sparked a fire inside him. Alara whispered again, her voice trembling yet determined, "Please, take me." Just a few words, but Caleb caught every beat of emotion within them. Not only desperation, but complete trust placed entirely in him. She entrusted herself, her hope, to a stranger, and it stirred something deep within him. He drew a deep breath. The world around him seemed to fade. The mocking laughter, whistles, swirling dust. Caleb saw only her eyes. In that quiet moment, a unique connection formed, silent, subtle, yet powerful enough to dim everything else around them. Despite exhaustion and pain, Alara did not falter. She believed in Caleb, and that faith tugged at him, pulling him from the shadows of his usual silence. He knew that if he retreated, she would continue to face humiliation, shoves, prying eyes, and relentless suffering. But if he stepped in, it would be a risky decision, a quiet act of heroism he had never displayed publicly. He stepped closer, each footfall deliberate, measured, yet heavy with intent. His eyes never left hers, studying every detail. The scratches on her skin, the dust clinging to her hair, the tiny beads of sweat on her brow. Caleb knew one wrong move could escalate the chaos, yet the urge to protect her overpowered fear. A derisive laugh from Sheriff Marlowe echoed, but Caleb ignored it. He focused solely on Alara, and this time, when she looked directly into his eyes, lips pressed tight, heartbeat rapid, he sensed an unspoken understanding, a profound empathy. This was no longer simply a moment of rescue. It was a human connection, rare and significant in such a cruel world. Alara no longer seemed afraid. Her body weary, her eyes still glimmered with fragile hope. Caleb realized that with just one step, she would forever find him in the sea of hostile faces. And he understood. Sometimes, a single look could speak louder than any words, and today, that look spoke volumes. In that instant, Caleb's pulse quickened. He stood at a crossroads. Continue past her, retreat to safety, or intervene, risking himself to protect her. A part of him wanted private peace, but another, stronger, urged action. This inner struggle lasted only a moment, yet it revealed his true nature. He could not turn away. The air seemed heavier now, but Caleb advanced. The silent connection between him and Alara endured, as if the world beyond had paused. Every mocking laugh, every whistle, became mere background to his forthcoming choice, a choice that would alter both their fates. Alara's whispered plea echoed once more in Caleb's mind, brief but laden with weight. "Please, take me." He closed his eyes, drew a steadying breath, and finally, his decision was made. Not with words, not with force, but with the heart. Caleb investigates the truth. Caleb stepped into the small shop tucked away on a quiet street corner, where the mingling scents of flour, leather, oil, and dust created a strange, familiar, yet deeply grounded atmosphere. He took a deep breath, letting his mind detach from the images he had just witnessed in the square. The mocking laughter and prying eyes still echoed faintly, but now he needed to look for the truth, piece by piece. The shopkeeper, Thomas Reich, a middle-aged man with unkempt hair and sharp eyes, stood behind the counter, wiping an old scale with a dust-covered rag. When Caleb approached, Thomas's gaze lingered on him for a moment before he spoke in a calm, cautious tone. "You here to find out about that girl?" Caleb nodded slightly, his eyes probing. "I want to know the truth. I don't care about what the crowd says. I just want to know what she actually did. His voice was steady and deliberate, each word carrying a clear purpose beneath the surface. Thomas put the rag down and sighed. Truth be told, I reckon she was hungry. Didn't seem like she had much else. What she did was just to survive. Caleb furrowed his brow, thinking carefully. A moment of silence fell, filled only by the wind drifting through the window and the occasional creak of the old scale. He studied Thomas's face, listening to every word, every nuance, to ensure the information was honest and unembellished. So she's not a bad person, Caleb murmured to himself. She's just someone driven to the edge by circumstance. Thomas nodded, his eyes glinting with a trace of empathy. Exactly, and no matter what she did, she's got grit. I've never seen anyone stand in front of a crowd like that without bowing. Even humiliated, she held her ground. Look into her eyes, and you'll see something special. Caleb inhaled deeply, closing his eyes once more to focus. The mention of Alara's grit made him realize something important. She wasn't just a girl in need of help. She was someone worthy of trust, someone with endurance and courage rarely seen. He understood that if he acted, he wouldn't just rescue her from the immediate moment. He would give her the chance to stand tall and reclaim her dignity. He glanced toward the small jail where Alara was being led. Even from a distance, he noticed her slight nod, a silent yet meaningful gesture. That fleeting moment reminded him of her earlier plea. Please, take me. This invisible thread between them reinforced the mysterious connection Caleb felt more vividly than any words could. Caleb walked slowly past the counter, his hand brushing against bags of flour and old spice boxes, grounding himself before making his next move. Each step was deliberate, carefully weighing how to act in a way that would protect her without causing chaos. This was not haste. It was a deliberate investigation, each detail noted and analyzed. Does she have family? Caleb asked, his voice calm but laced with genuine concern. Thomas shook his head. No, she's alone, or at least without anyone to lean on. That's why she had to do what she did. It was survival, not crime. Caleb nodded, his expression serious. This understanding strengthened his resolve. He wouldn't save her out of impulse, but because he saw the truth behind her actions, and he empathized with the desperation that had driven her. Once more, Caleb furrowed his brow, but this time a faint smile appeared. Despite the seriousness, he recognized the vitality within her, the grit, the endurance, the pride she clung to, however fragile. He realized that any decision he made from now on would not only save Alara but also give her a chance to prove herself. The final moment before leaving the shop, his eyes drifted toward where Alara was being taken into jail. That slight nod from her remained in his mind, a silent reminder that the trust she placed in him was real, a trust strong enough to spur him to action, and enough for him to understand that his decision would not merely save a life. It would lay the foundation for a new, mysterious, but deeply meaningful connection. Caleb exhaled and stepped out of the shop. The outside air was still thick with dust and harsh sunlight, but within him, a clear determination had formed. He knew the truth, understood Alara's grit and her circumstances, and from this moment, the true journey began. Not in haste, but with certainty, step by step, to protect her and help her stand tall in this harsh world. Rescuing Alara. Caleb strode quickly down the dusty street toward the small police station at the edge of town. Every step was deliberate, his mind running through every possible scenario. If he didn't act now, Alara could be taken elsewhere, forced into exhausting labor under guard, or even sold to a worse place. The thought drove his unshakable resolve. He adjusted the saddlebag at his side, knowing it held enough coins to make any negotiation meaningful. Every detail was considered. How to open the police office door, how to confront Sheriff Mallory. A man Caleb knew would not yield easily. Outside, the wind carried dust and the sounds of the bustling town. Caleb drew a deep breath, pushed open the door, and stepped in. Golden sunlight revealed dust motes dancing in the air, and immediately, Mallory's eyes snapped toward him, full of contempt. "What are you here for?" Mallory asked sharply, as if testing him right away. Caleb stood tall, eyes steady, voice calm but unwavering. I'm here to pay the fine you claim she owes. I'm not negotiating or arguing. Mallory arched an eyebrow, a smirk of disdain playing on his lips. So you're buying her off me? Caleb slammed the coin bag onto the table decisively. The clinking of the coins echoed like a declaration of intent. I'm paying the fine you say she owes. That ends it. A tense silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of coins and Caleb's steady breathing. Mallory scanned the coins, then Caleb, trying to read his intentions. But Caleb's gaze never wavered. He controlled the situation completely, showing that no threat or trick could sway his resolve. Mallory narrowed his eyes. She won't be yours that easily. Caleb's voice cut sharp as a blade. I never said it would be easy, but I've decided. No further words. Time seemed suspended, the clatter of coins and the quiet rhythm of Caleb's breath marking the moment. His gaze never left Mallory, who realized that no bluster or threat could move him. Once again, Caleb lifted the bag of coins, placing it squarely on the table. His steady eyes reinforced the symbols of power, commitment, and intent to protect Alara. After a few moments of hesitation, Mallory finally exhaled and nodded reluctantly. She's free, Mallory muttered, his voice tinged with frustration but powerless against Caleb's unwavering decision. Caleb gave a slight nod and stepped aside, motioning for Alara to follow. Alara emerged, slightly bewildered, unable to fully believe the freedom she had just received. She looked at Caleb, her wide eyes asking, in a trembling whisper, "Why?" Caleb met her gaze, sharp yet gentle, and evaded a direct answer. Doesn't matter right now. Alara frowned, a mixture of confusion and relief crossing her features. She sensed the certainty in his actions. She understood that now was the moment for action, and explanation would come later. Caleb's actions spoke louder than words. He protected her not for promises or reasons, but because it was the right thing to do. They exited the police station together, stepping into the dusty street. The wind still blew, but the tension had lifted. Alara felt a slight sense of relief, her feet released from the chains of fear and humiliation. Caleb walked beside her, eyes alert, ready for any situation that might arise. Each step carried a rhythm that was brisk enough to convey urgency, yet slow enough to savor the relief Alara had just received. Caleb spoke little, but his gestures and glances conveyed a clear message. She was no longer alone. At that moment, with sunlight catching the dust in their wake, Alara looked at Caleb again. Her question, "Why?" lingered in her eyes. Caleb responded only with a faint smile and a subtle remark, "Doesn't matter right now." They continued down the street, the town bustling around them, but for the two of them, time seemed altered. No mocking laughter, no humiliation, just determination, a touch of awkward relief, and the beginning of a connection formed through actions rather than words. Caleb had completed his part, not only rescuing Alara from the immediate peril, but laying the foundation for a new, mysterious, and meaningful bond, one built on decisive, unwavering action. Northern Journey building trust. Early in the morning, the cold air slipped through the makeshift tent, sending shivers through Alara in her thin, damp clothing. A thin moon hung above the mesquite trees, casting long shadows that seemed to guide the way for the journey ahead. Caleb watched her from a short distance, noticing every small sign of fatigue and tension. He approached slowly, carefully, his movements gentle and deliberate, as if determined not to frighten her again. "I've got something to help your feet," Caleb said softly but firmly. He pulled a clean pair of socks and a small jar of ointment from his bag, placing them on a nearby sandbag. Alara shook her head, but her hesitant eyes didn't stop him. Caleb carefully removed her dusty boots, wiped away the dirt, and applied the ointment to her sore, swollen feet, paying attention to every toe. "When you walked all through last night, you endured more than I thought," Caleb said, his voice low, a mix of observation and empathy. Alara closed her eyes and exhaled, lowering the walls around her for the first time. "I hadn't eaten in 2 days," she admitted, her voice hoarse but honest. And there's no one left for me to rely on. Caleb didn't judge. He simply nodded, sliding the socks onto her feet and pulling them up carefully, then looked her in the eyes. Sounds like you needed it more than they did, he replied. A simple statement, yet full of understanding. They remained silent for a few minutes, listening to the wind whistle through the trees and the dry crunch of dirt beneath their boots. These wordless moments formed a strong bridge between them, built on Caleb's practical care and patient presence. As they began the journey north, each step through dry creek beds and valleys allowed them to adjust to one another's presence. Caleb led the horse cautiously, occasionally stopping to mend Alara's torn dress or adjust her saddle straps to prevent snagging. Each gesture was ordinary, yet it conveyed a clear message. He cared for her, and she could trust him. In the afternoon, they paused near a small stream. Caleb handed her a cloth to wash her face, then wrapped a clean bandage around a scraped wrist. You've endured a lot, he said quietly, firmly. I'll help you keep going, step by step. Alara looked at him, a flicker of hope in her eyes, though she still hesitated. She began to open up about her past, the times she had to steal to survive, the loss of her family. There's no one left. No one, she admitted, voice trembling. Caleb listened, never interrupting, occasionally nodding. Sounds like you've had to get through a lot on your own, he said as she paused, eyes filled with pain. No need to hide it anymore. You did what you had to survive. Throughout the journey, small gestures became habitual. During breaks, Alara leaned her head toward Caleb for reassurance. On horseback, her shoulder brushed against his, her knees occasionally touching his boots. When he mended her dress or put on socks, she no longer hesitated. Every touch and action contributed to building trust, a silent yet clear bond growing stronger than any spoken promise. The northern sky darkened, moonlight filtering through the branches, creating a vast yet harsh landscape. Caleb observed Alara and noticed the change. She no longer kept her distance. Trust was forming slowly but surely, founded on practical care, protection, and unwavering presence. They continued through valleys, dry creek beds, sparse trees, and sandy hills. The slow rhythm of travel, punctuated by moments of mutual care, allowed the audience to feel the natural development of their relationship. Caleb didn't need many words. Each action spoke volumes. Each gesture conveyed deep concern. By nightfall, they set up a temporary camp by the stream. Caleb prepared sleeping arrangements for both of them. For the first time, Alara slept peacefully, turning her face toward him, as if seeking his presence as a shield against the harsh world outside. Caleb watched her, smiling faintly, recognizing that trust had been established, fragile but genuinely enduring. The days traveling north were not merely about reaching a destination. They were about building trust step by step, through practical acts of care, through revealing past pain, and through the sense of safety Alara experienced. Caleb became the companion she could rely on, not judging, not rushing, just patient and gentle. And it was this presence that laid the foundation for an increasingly close and lasting bond. Turning point, a new beginning. The late afternoon sky glowed with a warm orange hue, the fading light filtering through the mesquite trees, casting long shadows over the dry earth. Caleb led Alara slowly across the sandy mounds, each step careful and deliberate. His gaze never left her, watching for any signs of fatigue or tension. The cold distance that had once separated them had vanished. Their presence felt close, tender, and comforting. They paused by a small stream, its calm water reflecting the sunset like a natural mirror. Caleb knelt beside her, gently removing her worn gloves and lightly brushing her hands. The warmth of his skin met hers in a subtle yet meaningful way. "I won't ever let you go through this alone again," he whispered, his voice soft but steady. Alara met his eyes and saw the sincerity and quiet determination within them. Her heart stirred with a sensation both familiar and new, a rhythm intertwining with Caleb's own. She could feel the trust they had built through small acts of care, gestures that spoke louder than words. The moment lingered, as if the world around them had disappeared, leaving only the two of them in silence. Caleb moved closer, resting his hand on her shoulder, and for the first time, their lips met in a tentative, gentle kiss, soft, hesitant, yet filled with hope. That first kiss was more than a romantic gesture. It erased physical and emotional distance, transforming trust into a profound connection. Alara closed her eyes, feeling each breath, each heartbeat, and slowly allowed herself to relax. "When I wouldn't do anything to help you," Caleb murmured, his voice low yet firm, "I would have thought less of myself." His confession was not only sincere, it was a declaration of his morality, of why he was here, and why he acted for Alara. This was the moment their relationship evolved beyond friendship or gratitude, becoming a deep, unspoken commitment of protection, care, and companionship. After the kiss, they continued walking, and darkness began to settle. Caleb led Alara to a small hill where he had discovered an old cabin, weathered, damaged, yet still standing. This place was more than a physical shelter. It symbolized a new beginning, a foundation they could build together, a safe haven for both body and soul. "We can fix it up," Caleb said, his voice calm and confident, examining each rotting plank and torn roof panel. Alara stepped forward, helping him lift wood and straighten the remaining metal sheets. Each small action carried weight. They were not just rebuilding the cabin, but also reconstructing a sense of safety, trust, and hope. As Caleb repaired the wooden planks, Alara wiped her sweat-streaked face, eyes glimmering with pride. "I never thought I'd find a place like this," she admitted, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "There's nothing to go back to anymore. This is ours." Her words echoed inside the empty cabin, declaring a newfound bond and her choice to stay, to trust Caleb. Evening came, the small fire in the cabin casting a warm, flickering light over their faces. Caleb sat beside Alara, holding her hand, feeling the warmth transfer from her to him. The silence between them was not empty. It was filled with safety, understanding, and a deep, intimate sense of connection neither needed words to explain. As night fell, they shared small stories of their journey north, speaking of fears, losses, and moments of hope. Each story, each confession, became a brick in the wall of trust they were building, strong, unbreakable by any external challenge. The moment ended in quiet, the firelight dancing in their eyes as they gazed out the window at the dark northern forest. Caleb gently rested his hand on Alara's shoulder, and she leaned her head against him, sensing warmth and steadiness. This was more than a shelter. It was a new beginning, a turning point in their lives where they learned to trust, to love, and to build a future together. This turning point marked a significant milestone. From mere rescue and protection, through acts of care and attention, they had progressed to a deep emotional and spiritual connection. Within the old cabin, they were repairing more than just the physical structure. They were restoring trust, hope, and love. From this moment on, each day became a new chapter of life written together, solid, warm, and full of promise. Building a home and the wordless vow. Early morning in the northern lands, sunlight filtered through the mesquite trees, casting warm beams onto the small cabin nestled in the quiet valley. No more hurried footsteps, no more shadows of threat from the outside world. Caleb and Alara had found their own sanctuary, and every breath, every gesture carried safety, certainty, and peace. Caleb began the day by repairing the section of the roof torn by the wind. His hands were smudged with sawdust, yet his eyes lit up with simple joy as he watched Alara gathering dry grass to stoke the fire. She smiled, the glow of the flames reflecting on her face, and Caleb felt warmth radiate, not just from the fire, but from her presence. "Want to help?" Caleb asked, his voice calm, but his eyes carried a quiet, intimate invitation. Alara nodded and stepped closer, lending her hands to stabilize a plank. These small acts, seemingly simple, carried great weight. Each touch, each glance emphasized the bond built over many months. Trust, care, and a deep affection blossoming between them. After the roof was mended, Alara turned to the kitchen. She sifted flour, mixed sugar, and baked bread over the small fire. The aroma filled the cabin, warming both body and spirit. Caleb stood nearby, watching her with tenderness, occasionally brushing dust off her sleeve or adjusting her apron. No words were necessary. These quiet, deliberate acts were their true home in motion. In the afternoon, the chill wind swept through the trees, but neither felt lonely or afraid. Caleb helped Alara gather firewood and patched small holes in the cabin while she prepared meals and tidied the space. Everything moved in a slow, steady rhythm, highlighting cooperation, trust, and the love that had silently grown between them. In a moment of calm, Alara looked Caleb in the eyes, her voice gentle but resolute. "And if I told you I want to stay here with you?" Caleb smiled without hesitation, replying, "Then I tell you I want the same." Those simple words carried immense weight, a clear declaration of love and mutual understanding. No elaborate promises were needed. Their actions, their presence, and their silent understanding said it all. They had found each other and decided to stay, turning the small cabin into a true home. Night fell, and the wind whispered through the cracks in the cabin, creating a soothing rhythm that cradled them. Caleb and Alara sat by the fire, sharing a bowl of hot stew, recounting the journey north, their losses, and moments of hope. Each story, each shared memory became another brick in the foundation of the home they were building together. Caleb looked at Alara with steady, gentle eyes. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth transfer between them. No words were necessary. The peace, the connection, and the love were self-evident. The following days unfolded in a quiet, purposeful routine. They gathered firewood, repaired the cabin, baked bread, prepared meals, and readied themselves for the coming winter. Each gesture conveyed care and concern, from Caleb mending Alara's torn dress after a day in the sun to her laying out warm blankets for him at night. Every small detail reinforced stability and steadfast love within the little cabin. Then one tranquil morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, Alara surveyed the cabin, took a deep breath and said to Caleb, "The road north was meant as escape, but it has become home." Caleb took her hand, smiling softly, his eyes sparkling. "Staying here is our own kind of vow, and we'll keep it." No further explanation was needed. The small cabin, with its patched wooden planks, warm fire, and daily rhythm, had become a true home, where love and connection filled every corner. Each day, they lived fully in the present, facing winter together, nurturing their home, and honoring their wordless vow. Life here was no longer about running or surviving. Every action, every gesture, every glance reaffirmed one truth. They had found a home, and they had found each other within it. Together, they were writing a new chapter, one filled with peace, stability, and love that suffused every moment. Conclusion, peace, and home. Winter passed quietly, yet with a gentle warmth. The forests lay blanketed in snow, sunlight filtering through the mesquite trees, casting delicate rays on the small cabin. Caleb and Alara had faced the cold winds, snowstorms, and the painful memories of the past together. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger, and every small gesture reminded them that they were no longer alone. Early one morning, Caleb opened the cabin door, taking a deep breath, and saw Alara tending the fire for breakfast. She smiled brightly as he approached, their hands brushing naturally, a familiar rhythm their hearts already knew. Words were unnecessary. One look, one smile, one held hand spoke everything. Day by day, the cabin became a refuge for both body and soul. They planted a small garden, cared for a few animals, repaired the cabin, and prepared for the seasons ahead. Every ordinary task carried deep connection, and little by little, they transformed this place into a true home, where all the worries and fears of the past seemed to fade away. One afternoon, as the sun sank low, Caleb and Alara sat by the stream near the cabin, hand in hand, watching the last rays of sunlight reflect on the water. Alara leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You know, I have nowhere else to go, but here with you I feel at peace." Caleb smiled, gently stroking her hair, and replied, And I feel the same. We found home. Not just this cabin, but each other. As night fell and stars glittered above, the small cabin, with its warm fire, soft laughter, and their shared presence, became a testament to enduring love, a home built from trust, care, and patience. They no longer needed spoken vows. Every action, every gesture was a wordless promise, a lifelong commitment to one another. And as darkness settled in, Caleb and Alara sat together in quiet contentment. They had walked through fear, pain, and danger to find peace. Now, amid the cold winds and snowy landscape, they knew that no challenge could ever separate them from the home they had built together. Every journey had led them back to each other, and this was where they would remain, a place called home, where love and connection would endure forever.